Hi there, good afternoon. This is Melissa Benaroya. I am a licensed clinical social worker and I've been working with children and families for almost 20 years. And I am coming to you today with the Childproof Parenting Friday Facebook Live. And I've been doing these Friday Lives to answer questions and follow up on articles that I've written because I've gotten a lot of feedback and I want to be able to answer that for you live. So I'm really excited that you're here with me today, and I know many of you are going to pop in and out live, and then several of you are going to watch this much later. And that's great. I just want to make sure that you get the information and you get your questions answered. So today on the Childproof Parenting Friday Live, I am actually answering a reader question. So last week I spoke about some of the most common parenting mistakes that parents make and what we can do instead. And in response to that, I got an email from Tony, and Tony was concerned because he wanted to know if it's okay to give kids allowance. And I think that is a great question because there's so many ways that we can go with allowance, and most parents want to give kids allowance so that way they learn the value of money. So I think how we use allowance is really, really important. And so I'm just gonna talk about it for a few minutes, and then if you're here with me live, you're welcome to ask questions. If you are watching this later and you have a specific question, please feel free to post your question underneath this live down below, and I will make sure I answer that for you. So first of all, we want to obviously teach kids our values. We want to teach them to be responsible and learn the value of money. And I think allowance is really nice because it also helps us disengage from those conversations and the dialogue with our kids about buying them stuff all the time. So when they have their own money, they can actually buy things for themselves, and it's not going to be a constant negotiation or battle. But how we set up that allowance is really important. And I think first and foremost, thinking about what you feel comfortable with giving your child. Now, it doesn't have to be a lot of money. I know with my kids when they were really young, I think we probably started giving allowance when they were about 5, and they got $3 a week. So it wasn't a ton of money, but it gave them a little bit of spending money. It also gave them money to save for things that they want. And it also gave them opportunities to save and share and donate. And one thing that we use really early on, which I think is great with young kids and really just makes implementing this really easy, is using something called a moon jar. And I know there's lots of other versions of this kind of piggy bank where it has 3 separate slots. So one slot is for saving, one's for spending that they can kind of use on whatever. If there's some junky toy they want, they can use that money. That's totally fine. And there's also one there for sharing and giving. And I think that's a really valuable tool to use to teach philanthropy and helping others and empathy and compassion. So I think finding something that your child is really passionate about is wonderful, and tying it into allowance is super helpful. So whether it's, they get upset when they see homeless people, or they're passionate about animals, like help them pick out their cause, the thing that they really want to support. And then you can start weekly having dialogue about it as they start making deposits into this part of their bank. So that is one suggestion. Some families give much more money, and as kids get older, they obviously require a little bit more money. So I think starting as small as $3, it could even be as small as 75 cents. I like separating it into threes because it just makes it easy to divide for me, but whatever works for your family. As kids get older, that will definitely change. Now, and thinking about the allowance, and most parents have this natural tendency to tie allowance into chores. And honestly, I think that's a bad idea, because there are things that your kids should be doing in your home and within your family that is part of being a family. That is a responsibility. And I'm assuming you're showing up and you're invested in your parenting and you want your kids to learn to be responsible for themselves. So we shouldn't have to pay kids to brush their teeth and make their bed. Those are some basic things that kids should be doing regardless. So I don't think it's a great idea to tie chores to allowance. Kids should get allowance to get allowance, and that is their money, and they learn to manage that. But it shouldn't be tied to chores. So I think every family should have some clear responsibilities for kids. And once again, that changes at different ages and stages. So really young kids, they can get themselves dressed. Maybe they pour drinks at mealtime, or maybe even just pour kids drinks. So if you have small little plastic cups, that's possible. So thinking about some really small things little kids can take on, and acknowledging that most times our kids can do more than we give them credit for. And it may take a little bit of time for training to do some of these things independently, but there is a lot that really young kids can do. And in taking on some of these responsibilities, they start to feel this sense of contribution and importance in the family. So I think there's a lot of value to giving kids responsibility. Obviously, as they get older, they can help set the table, they can help prepare meals, they can clean up meals, they can wipe down counters. My kids are kind of preteen and teenagers now, so they empty the dishwasher and they choose to do that together. And in order to not make a fight, one does the top, one does the bottom, and then each month they flip-flop because they have their preferences of what they'd rather do. So letting them take ownership of that. My kids also do all of the folding of the laundry. So there's lots that older kids can do that takes a little bit of training but can be a big help, and at the same time not tied into allowance. So want to acknowledge that kids are highly capable, they should be participating in family chores, and they don't need to get paid for it. Now I realize there's sometimes kids, there's things they really, really want, and $3 a week or $5 a week is not gonna get them there quick enough. Great. So there are definitely things that kids can take on top of their family responsibilities. So if it's weeding out in the garden or washing the car, things that aren't part of their week-to-week responsibility, they can earn more money on top of that. So I think that's perfectly fine. It's not allowance. Because remember, if we start tying allowance to chores, then we set ourselves up for power struggles. And the power struggles look like kids turning what was once a bribe on our end of, hey, if you go do this, I'll pay you, or maybe even a threat like, you know what, if you don't put the garbage away, then I'm gonna take away your allowance. So it removes us from these power struggles that most parents dread and don't enjoy being a part of. And it also removes us from the constant negotiation and manipulation that I hear a lot of parents complain about. So we kind of remove ourselves altogether when we take money out of the daily responsibility. So being mindful that it not only teaches your values, money management, but it helps keep you out of negotiations, manipulations, and power struggles. And I hear parents all the time using this allowance, like holding it over them. And you know, that's just, we want our kids to learn to manage money on their own. So if we end up withholding, and that's what a lot of parents end up doing, is withholding allowance, and then kids don't have anything to manage. So I think being mindful of giving kids responsibility, and actually have a list of what kids are capable of at different ages and stages. So if you're interested in that, let me know. Just go ahead and post, and I will make sure I make that available to you. I think that's helpful because some parents aren't really cognizant of, well, what is my kid capable of at this age? So I'm happy to share that with you if you think that's valuable. I gave you a few ideas, but I can definitely throw that out, and I'll make that available. Maybe I can attach it to here, but I'll make sure I get it to you regardless. So wanted to give you a few ideas there. I think as kids get older, obviously the moon jar system is not always gonna work for teenagers and elementary school kids. So set up an account at the bank for them, walk them in there. These are life skills that we're teaching our kids, and have them keep a register. So as they get their allowance, they can copy it down. They've got math skills. They're balancing their budget. When you're in the store and they want to buy something, they can easily recognize how much they have and if they're capable of buying those things that they want. So one thing that I've done in the past with my kids is actually keeping a big wad of $1 bills for allowance. So if you're thinking of implementing this, it can be helpful to just have that cash on hand, because it's important that if you're going to do this, that you're consistent. So I think being mindful of picking the day of the week that you give allowance can be helpful, and just having that cash on hand. So we used to just give out singles. Now that my kids are older and they have bank accounts that they manage and they keep registers, to make it easy on us, and so that we are consistent, we do a weekly deposit. So we just deposit directly into their account, and we don't have to manage money, and they don't have wads of cash hanging around their bedrooms anymore either, because they're older and they're getting more money. So I think for older kids, there's a great system that you can set up just using your local bank. And so that's another way to incorporate using allowance with kids. So hopefully Tony, I don't know if Tony made it here live with us today. I let him know that we'd be chatting about his question. I wanted to make sure I answered it. And my answer to Tony was yes, allowance is really valuable, and we should give kids allowance, but we should not attach it to their weekly chores or their daily chores. So I want to open it up. I see there's a few people kind of coming in and out, and I see Becky's here with us. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those questions right now live with you. You just need to type that in the box and I can answer that. And if you're not live, like I said, you can go ahead and type it down below after the video, and I will make sure I respond to those. I had a lot of feedback last week, so I want to make sure I respond to everybody this week. All right, I'll give you a second or two because I know it takes time to type. Okay, we use buttons in a jar. Oh, let me see. I got to see if I can tap your, darn it, I don't see all of your message. What age do you introduce? Okay, Becky, I saw you said you use buttons in a jar, but it ended there. And so I'm wondering how you translate those buttons in, when they do something good. Okay, so I'm so glad you brought that up, Becky. And Helen, don't worry, I'm coming back to your question. So buttons in a jar is different than allowance, because that's a reward system. And I don't suggest using that reward system because it's that form of manipulation. And I think acknowledgement is so much more powerful. And I actually have 2 blog posts on this. The one is on mindset and using encouragement and acknowledgement. And a lot of that goes back to Carol Dweck's work, which I talked about last week as well, I believe. So I would suggest expecting good behavior, right? So we don't want to reward it with, I don't know what the buttons go towards. Maybe they earn something with the buttons. But I think the acknowledgement and building an internal moral compass of feeling good about doing something. So even just showing appreciation, Becky, would be helpful. Like, well, I really appreciate your help, or I notice how kind you are being to your sister right now. So simply making an evaluation-free statement, acknowledging it, to reinforce that behavior. Okay, Becky says, sounds like we need to have a family meeting to discuss chores and expectations. I think that's a great idea. I think a family meeting is exactly what needs to happen, especially because you have a 5-year-old, so she can definitely help guide that meeting as well. So sit down, talk about what's realistic, what people are responsible for doing. And for little guys, and this kind of goes back to Helen's question, you know, at 3 years old, they can brush their teeth. They may need a little of assistance. They can brush their teeth. They can get themselves dressed. They can put their pillow and pull the covers up on their bed acknowledging that they're not going to make the bed the same way you do. That's okay. We want them to start taking on some of these things. They're going to get better over time, and you can go back and straighten up if it kills you. But I think giving kids some of these responsibilities is really important. So Helen, with a 2 or a 3-year-old, we can start teaching them to pour water in a glass so they can serve themselves their drink at mealtime. So there's small little things. Putting their shoes away or hanging up their jacket are small little things that kids can be doing that are part of their responsibility. Okay, so Helen says hers is 7. So at 7, your child can be doing a whole lot more. They can be helping making lunch. So when my kids were really young, one thing they were responsible for was the snack portion of their lunch. So I had a few snack options, whether it was a cheese stick or pretzels or whatever. They chose the snack portion of their lunch. Now they do a lot more in making lunch. They chop up veggies and all those types of things. But I think really early on, that's an easy thing that they can incorporate in being a responsibility. Kids can help wipe down a counter. They can help wash dishes at 7 years old. They can make their bed. They can be responsible for packing up their backpack. So I think there's a lot. And I had shared before, Helen, and I'm happy to do this, is I have a list of age-appropriate chores. And I'm happy to share that with all of you if you think that'd be helpful. So I think there's a lot that we can do. One thing that I do in my family, and I think makes it easy to transition and kind of build for kids, is on their birthday every year, letting them pick one new responsibility at home. So you can sit down and chat about a few things because you know what's age appropriate. Chat about a few things that you think they're capable of doing and letting them pick one thing. So we're not sitting down and telling them, you know what, you're 7 now. You can start mopping the floor. That's not going to be really well received. So it's just focusing on the fact that they're a year older and they're so much more responsible and mature, and what new thing would they like to take on with the family. So that's a natural way of adding things to their daily and weekly responsibilities. So I hope that answers your question, Helen, and it sounds like you'd like to get some of that feedback on what is age appropriate, especially for a 7-year-old. And I can give you kind of the list kind of going beyond, just so you can see what's to come in future conversations. Any other questions I can answer before I sign off? Okay, great. I got you, Helen. We're good. Any other questions I can answer before I sign off? Like I said before, and Helen says, should we be starting allowance at this age? Absolutely. Yes, you can absolutely start allowance at this age. And like I said before, allowance does not get attached to daily and weekly responsibilities. So kids need to learn your family values, money management, responsibility. So they need to have their own money. So that way when you're in the store and they're like, oh my God, I really, really want this thing. Great. You can say yes. You should get this. How much do you have in your allowance, or how much do you need to save up? It really takes us out of that power struggle and that negotiation, and we give it to them to own. And they start realizing the value of money, because you can't just buy anything you want on a little plastic card at any point in time, right? So I think allowance now is a great time to start. I think you can start really small. You can give as little as 75 cents, $3, $5, whatever you feel comfortable with. As I had mentioned before, there's things like the moon jar, which is split into 3 sections. That's really helpful. The spend, what is available to spend at any time. Saving, if there's something your child really wants and is saving towards. And then share. And that's giving to a cause or an organization that your child feels really passionate about. So in the years past, my kids picked a specific animal at the zoo they loved, and they raised money for that endangered species. They collected it in their little moon jars, and I took them to the zoo. They dumped their money out on the counter and made that donation. So there was that connection. It wasn't just like, oh, I love the red panda and here's some money I'm saving for it. They got to go to the zoo. They got to donate it. They had an interaction with another human that loves animals and showed appreciation towards the money that they save. So I think making as many connections as possible is really important. And with a 7-year-old, not only can you do that, but like I talked about before, you can set up a savings account at a bank. So taking them to the bank to deposit their money. I think making this a meaningful experience is going to reinforce those values and that responsibility. Do you have different amounts for different ages? You know, Becky, it really depends on what you feel comfortable with. I think what I wanted to drive home was it doesn't have to be a lot of money. It can be as simple as just a few dollars or 75 cents. I wouldn't be putting too much money in little hands too soon. So I think you get to figure out what works for you. As I had shared before, I started when my kids were pretty young. My oldest was probably about 5 and my younger one was 3. And I gave them $3 each. And I didn't attach it to like how old they were. They both got the same thing. And I did that just out of simplicity and making it easy to divide into the moon jar that we used. And I understand you can Google moon jar, but there are several other kind of like banks that allow you to separate the amount of money that kids are saving. So interested to hear what you would feel comfortable in giving your kiddos. I know you've got 3 kids, all different ages, and maybe the youngest is a little too young to start, which is perfectly fine. But this is a great conversation, like you said, Becky, to have at a family meeting. Sorry, I'm looking down at your comments and making sure I'm responding. So these are great conversations to have at a family meeting. And if you're curious about what family meetings are, we can definitely save that for another day and talk about what family meetings are, what gets discussed, how to start the family meeting process. I think it's really valuable tool and conversation for families to have on a weekly basis. So if I've answered all of your questions, I am going to sign off for now. But what I do before I do that, I want to make sure you all know that next Monday on April 3rd, I am launching a parenting boot camp. It is free. It's a 5-day boot camp. You're going to get a daily email with information, encouragement, some practices, which I call it workout. It's your parenting workout for the week since this is a boot camp. We also have a private Facebook group community for everybody in the boot camp. And I'm going to be doing daily Facebook Lives to answer questions about that day's workout. So feel free to go over to childproofparenting.com and sign up. There is a box at the top that just has a quick blurb about the boot camp, and you just click on the button and you can register yourself. It's free. Invite a friend. I think the more people in your community doing it with you, the easier it is going to be to implement because you've got that support and accountability. So I would love to have you join us. We already have a few hundred people signed up and people from all over the world, which I think is really cool. Unfortunately, it's going to be a little tough. There's a handful of people in Australia. Hello to my people in Australia. So timing's going to be off a little bit, but I'm going to try to make sure everybody gets everything in their morning time and really have an opportunity to practice ways of being more calm, ways to connect with our kids, and also ways to invite their cooperation. So I hope you're able to join us for the boot camp. If you're not, I do want to let you know, and I haven't mentioned this yet to anybody, but I'm going to open up enrollment for the Childproof Parenting course again the end of April. So be on the lookout for that. I really hope that you'll be able to join us and a group of amazing parents. We're just closing down this first Childproof Parenting online course. The next one's starting May, and I think this transformational journey is amazing. It's an amazing group of parents, and I wanted to let you know that's coming up as well. All right, so any other questions that come up, please feel free to type them in the box. If I can answer it really quickly in the box, I will do that. Otherwise, I'll save it for next Friday. So feel free to share questions based on this topic, on the topic that I wrote about on the blog this week, which was about helping kids to be honest and say sorry. And that's it for today. So thanks so much. all of you for coming. I love having this opportunity to chat with all of you, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.